Now, if you are truly suffering from this problem that I've described, where you only want to play guard, what I just did there is almost unthinkable. I know this because up until right around purple, blue, there's this, oh, but you just play guard. But I'll just play more guard. And they'll back away from me and they'll just move away. But if I just could bring them into, if I did a different guard, no, this is, just get up. Get used to getting up. Okay, so we will go ahead and get started. Today we're going to do a little small amount of review on the escaping portion that we went through in our last lesson, just to sort of have some overlap between last topic and coming into what we're going to look at for the next few lessons, and that's the basics of playing guard, sort of an introduction to guard. And if your eyeballs are viewing this right now, you are probably familiar with the notion of something like guard or something called guard that is emphasized in jiu-jitsu and has a lot of importance in the sport, and also is a very deep mechanical position, and there's a lot of dynamics going on. It can be incredibly fun to play and incredibly useful in your various sparring scenarios, but one of the things about it is it can be very challenging to understand and keep track of all the different things that are going on, because they are changing so quickly, and because it's such an integral part of the pace of a match, that often it's good to approach it a few times, and each time we approach it, try to take away one or two big ideas that we're trying to incorporate as we move forward. So a lot of what we'll be doing today is, yes, talking about individual movements and techniques, but at least at first, trying to introduce the principles that we'll be using, introduce the fundamental movements that we'll be using, and then continuing to draw more fundamentals in as we go forward, so that when you're in a really dynamic, fast-moving situation, you don't necessarily have to remember a specific technique, but you understand what you're trying to accomplish, and you have some ideas about how to make that happen, and that's going to be more effective in the long term than any individual technique from guard. Okay, so let's start off just introducing some of the very sort of obvious things maybe that about guard, and then detail out how you and your partner will be adapting to each other in a sparring scenario. Okay, so there are a whole bunch of different forms of guard. Right now I'm in what we would call a seated form of guard, where I'm obviously seated. I can have my hand on the floor here. I can have a lead hand that looks to grab onto my partner and things like this. So this would be a seated guard. I can be in a position where I'm on my back, so a supine guard or an open guard. Again, a whole bunch of different grips are available, and I might be doing this for a number of different reasons. Maybe my opponent put me here and I didn't want to be here, or maybe I am better at playing in this kind of position than I am in a seated position. Okay, so we've got a seated type of guard, and we've got a supine guard, or one where I'm on my back. Now, related to those two, but not not as associated with guard, is the turtle position, where I'm in a position more or less like this. Now, the thing about turtle is you could think of it as sort of the worst form of guard. There was one athlete named Eduardo Teles who was sort of known for his turtle position and was very good from there. But other than that, most folks, most of the time, do not want to be in the turtle position, and they often will separate turtle from other forms of guard. But the truth is, in terms of scoring, in terms of mechanical advantages, it's much better for me to be in a turtle position, whether it's an open turtle position like this or a closed turtle position, than it is to be under the side controller, underneath the mount. So knowing how to move from the turtle and through the turtle is super important to having a good guard, because oftentimes it's sort of this place you go to prevent having your guard passed. And if you're comfortable using the turtle and you understand how it leads back into these other forms of guard, then you're much less likely to have your guard passed in a very fast exchange. Okay, so we've got a seated guard, we've got a supine guard, and we've got something called turtle position. Now we could break all those up into more and more sort of subdivisions, specific open guards, specific seated guards. We're not going to get into that yet. Okay, so right now I'm in a seated guard, and now I've got someone over here who's trying to do something about my guard. They're trying to generally pass my guard. There are other things they might be trying to do, jump over and submit you and things like this. But by and large, if I'm playing guard, they're trying to pass my guard. And this is most of what is going to occur in jiu-jitsu. Most of the winning and losing is going to be decided by who wins or loses in this scenario. Okay, so let's establish a few things right here. So Emmy's got a lead leg right now. It's her right leg. I've got a lead leg right now, my right leg. We both have a toe line where our big toes are on the mat. Right now, our toe lines are not crossing. Okay, if I go here, our toe lines are crossing. In general, we're going to start off in situations where we have our toe lines not crossing, and that either one of us would have to take a step or do some sort of advancement before they could breach that toe line. So where I was a moment ago, right about here, this is a little too close together to just be totally safe in guard. There's some immediate dangers that can happen because Emmy can shift her weight, and then she's all of a sudden breaking past my toe line. So we might start a little bit further back. Okay, so we've got this initial toe line here. We've also got a height. Okay, my height is where the top of my head is here. Emmy is so tall right now that she's totally out of the frame. Okay, Emmy will in general have to measure her height relative to mine. So she wants to keep her head higher than mine, but at about the same level. Okay, so if she were to bring her hands forward and have this kind of stance right about here. Now, if we're not in this exact setup, it's just because standing in this position while I go on and on and on and on is not really something she wants to do. So just keeping in mind, there's the relative height that we have right now. She has the height advantage. Her head is over mine. And she's going to be very reluctant to let me bring her head lower than mine or let me make movements where my head goes up and above hers. Okay, and I'm going to be reluctant because, again, I'm out of frame. Okay, that's not good. The position of my head, my height, will also be related to the position of my hip. For now, we can sort of set that aside, but keep in mind we have height with our head, and then we have level, which is our hip. What is the height of my hip relative to my partner's? Okay, that'll become more important later. Now, a couple other things to lay down. We both have a center line. Okay, it divides me to my left and right side. She's got a center line, divides her into left and right side. A lot of what we're trying to do in guard is to make sure that I can keep our center lines lined up. It doesn't mean I always have our center lines lined up, but I want to be able to go back to center lines lined up, and I want to be the person who decides that. If I'm ever under the mount or I'm under the side control, can I do the side control? Like this. One of the big things we could just say right away is if Emmy has me in side control, I can't just line our center lines back up straight away from here. I've got to do something, maybe creating a frame, getting my elbow in, doing different things like this, so that I could realign our center lines. Okay? So underneath the side control position, I don't have this immediate control over where my center line is in relation to hers. I want to be the one who's in control of that. Now, like a lot of other things, if I want to be in control of our center lines and I get a sense that I'm not actually in charge of that, it's best if I address that earlier or sooner rather than later. Okay, so a lot of what we're going to do first is to talk about some of the basic movements that we need to be able to do just in relation to keeping our center lines lined up. This is before anyone's passing guard. It's just the initial movements that might be hinting at a guard pass. This is before I'm doing any sort of submissions or sweeps. It's just guard maintenance. Okay, so first thing here, we've got our center lines lined up. Now let's keep this super obvious so we can really see what's going on here. If I want to keep our center lines lined up, then Emmy's objective is to not keep our center lines lined up. She doesn't want us to be parallel. She wants to be across my center line. So she can do that a bunch of different ways. She might just start walking to the side this way here. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do if she walks to the side is to turn and face her. Again, this is pretty obvious stuff. If she goes to the other side, I can turn to face her. Now, I only can do this because of the range that exists between us. If she were very close to me and started going to one side and I just followed her with no contact at all, and then she went to the other side, she's so close to me that by the time I try to meet her, she might be on my back, she might be going to my neck, different things like this. Okay, so depending on the range between us, I may be able to just turn with her. Now the reason this happens is because I'm turning in a circle and she's going on a circle that's sort of orbiting around the circle I'm on. So as long as there's distance between us, okay, as long as there's some separation, we're not breaching that toe line early, as long as there's some distance here, anytime Emmy goes to the side on me, I can easily follow her. That gets harder and harder to do as she gets closer and closer to me. Okay? So the first movement that we have to do is literally what I was just doing right now, just scooting around the mat. One thing I'll say about scooting is, let me actually do this way. If I'm lined up with you here, and I start scooting towards the camera, and I go straight forward like this, there's actually a lot of drag, and the movement is not all that efficient. When I end up going straight forward like this, I actually want to be turning slightly to the side. So if I want to go straight forward, it's actually best if I turn slightly to my left when I do that. Okay, and if I can also do that going the other side, or if I were to switch my stance. Okay, but when we're scooting on the mat, we don't want to be literally dragging our butt along the floor. We actually make a small turn whenever we go to move. Okay, again, that's just us moving on this sort of smaller circle, and my partner moving on this bigger circle. I want to just make sure that my movement has a small turn when I use a scoot. Now, there's also going to be times when, let's say if Emmy's down on her knees here. Now, in a situation like this, one of the big things that changes for Emmy is she's not nearly as mobile as she was when she was standing. It's much harder for her to move side to side very rapidly and change directions on me, but it's much easier for her to stay stable. Okay, so if Emmy was standing up one more time, in a position like this, I can upset her balance in lots of different ways, because the taller she goes, the higher her center of gravity goes, the more precariously her balance is situated, and I can more easily off balance her and potentially knock her down. She comes down to her knees though, it's a lot harder for me to put 2 knees down. 2 knees on the ground, even more stable. Now in a position like this, I could do that same sort of pushing and pulling on her, and maybe I don't really break her balance at all. So in this type of scenario, one of the main things I'll be looking to do is gain an advantage in height. And as I mentioned a moment ago, height is going to be my head position relative to hers. So if she's on her knees and she happens to sort of slouch down like this, this is not a good starting position for Emmy, because she's already conceded the height advantage to me just by having her head down a little bit like this. If she goes to her knees, she'll always want to be sure that she's still maintaining this head height advantage, unless she's doing something specific where that might be an exception. By and large, she wants to retain the height advantage. Okay? So again, let's just think about her trade-offs one more time. Previously, when she was standing, she was very mobile, and now she's on her knees, very stable. This trade-off between stability and mobility is always going to be in play. And from my perspective, when she comes down to her knees, she's more stable, harder for me to off-balance her. So I might not be moving as much in response to her mobility, but I might be going up and down in elevation, trying to gain a height advantage. So the next movement we used, the first one was scooting. Now we're going to go into heisting, where I pull my knee by my support hand. So I just turn and look towards my own hand, point my chest at the floor, and I slide my leg back. And you'll see that when I do that, my left knee and my left foot go to the line of my left hand. So here's my left hand on this line on the mat. When I go back and away, I put my foot and my knee on that same line. I don't want to go shallow, and then when I need to move my hand, I actually lose my balance slightly. Or even if I exaggerate that, here, if I move my hand right now, I start tipping over. Okay? So our second movement is heisting, which allows us to change elevation. It allows us to gain an advantage in height. So we go with a knee towards the support hand and a foot towards the support hand, and now I can gain an advantage in height over my partner. Okay? So again, we're starting with these really seemingly obvious movements. You've probably done them before, and just trying to understand how there's a dynamic that is starting to play out before anyone's even thinking about a guard pass or a submission or things like this. Okay, the first one was that I've got this guard position. I might be seated. I might be on my back. I might have to at some point go and play from a turtle position. So we've got these variations in how my body can be organized. Then my partner, she's got a stance, and her head height is going to be one of the big things she's trying to maintain in any type of stance here. In this kind of position, she's going to have the height advantage, but she brings her head to about the level of mine right here. We've got this notion of distance where I've got a toe line and she's got a toe line. And we're going to be very careful about whether we just step past the toe line and work, or if we're working at a distance where we haven't breached the toe line. We start understanding that we need to keep aligned with the other person, her center line and my center line. If she goes to this side and I purposefully move my center line away from her, that's horrible. I'm turning my back. That's why turning your back is so bad. It's because it breaks that fundamental alignment. She goes to one side, I might just scoot and keep our center lines lined up. She goes to the other side, and I scoot, and I just keep our center lines lined up, and I'm just vigilant about this. Now maybe she knows that I'm following her, so she comes down to her knees. We started looking at this idea of stability versus mobility. She was very mobile, now she's much more stable. The trade-off for her is that the height advantage is not nearly as significant. I can much more easily go heisting, where I pull my knee and foot to replace my hand, and now in this position I can start gaining a height advantage over her, pushing and pulling and snapping her down, maybe going for knee taps or ankle picks if she's standing up, and things like this. Okay, so we've got center line, we've got height, we've got distance, we've got angle. While all of this is happening, I need to keep my legs between the two of us. Now, what does that mean, my legs? It could mean the bottom of one foot between the two of us. Okay, and that's I'll come back to that in a moment. It might mean both of my knees. So it might be a position like this. That's here, where our center lines are lined up. My knees are between her head and mine, and her center line and mine. So this would be a fine guard position. Okay, I need to have some part of at least one of my legs between the two of us. In a hip check half guard, like this, I've got one knee on the pocket of her hip, and I've got a bottom leg here that's helping to secure it in place. Okay, so again, I've got at least one leg between the two of us. Close guard. I don't have any part of my leg that's good for pushing between the two of us, but I have my hips between the two of us, and I can pull her effectively with my legs. Okay, this is going to be one of the big differences with close guard as opposed to other forms of guard, is you don't have something to push with using your legs, but the trade-off is often worth it because there's so many submissions available. Let's go last. Let's look at another classic form of guard here. We've got the spider guard, where I take two grips, I turn my palms up, I pull my elbows to the floor, and I hook my feet into her biceps here. Here, obviously, I've got the bottom of my 2 feet between us, and I'm securing her, I'm keeping her on my legs by using these grips on her sleeve here. Okay, now if Emmy goes side to side on me, now I can easily follow her, and she goes to the other side, and I can easily follow her. Okay, so again, we're just introducing some of the things that are sort of always these are things you're always keeping track of when you're playing guard, and at the same time they're always trying to disrupt in one way or another. I want to have our center lines lined up. That would be great. I want to have at least the bottom of my foot or one of my knees, or maybe better still, both of my knees or both of my feet between the two of us. So I know that she doesn't want that. I want to be able to gain a height advantage if that ever presents itself, and I know she'll try to contest that. I know that she can be very stable or very mobile, and that when she's trading between the two, sometimes it will be in my interest to take advantage of that exchange. She becomes more stable, okay, I got to become more mobile. She becomes more mobile, maybe I want to trade for stability. Now here's the other thing to keep in mind with guard. Guard and guard passing are very asymmetrical on how they're set up. And what I mean is, if you think about two people fighting in MMA or wrestling or doing judo, the stances that the two athletes take often look very similar to each other. And so the advantage that one has over the other might be very slight. Often with a very skilled person, that's enough to completely win. But it's often a very slight difference in stance, and so the actual mechanical advantage, maybe not that big. In guard, or in the system of guard where somebody is passing and someone's playing, there's a huge asymmetry. My position is completely different than hers, at least on the face of it. And position here, where I'm lying on my back, and Emmy is standing over me here, this type of arrangement here is not even close to what it looks like to have two boxers facing each other trying to land jabs and set up uppercuts and things like that. So this trade-off that I was talking about with Emmy's stability and mobility is also available to me. When I put my spine on the floor like this, and my spine is stabilized by the stable surface of the floor, I gain an ability to take my legs off the ground and put them on my partner. Okay, she's using her legs obviously to stabilize herself on the mat, but I get to use my legs to keep her away from me. What's the trade-off? Well, I'm not very mobile right now. If this was an actual fight and I was like, hey, I'm gonna come beat you up, and I was like this, she could just exit the room and, okay, see you later. That's not the way you should do that. So the trade-off is I can't chase her down very effectively in this type of position, but I'm incredibly stable. Okay, so it's important to keep this in mind. I'm very stable right now, and the reason I want to be stable is so that I can bring my legs up and into play and manage some sort of distance between us. Okay, if she starts backing away from me, there's no way she's going to disrupt my stability, so I can sit up, I can become much more mobile. I'm much less stable now, but this is a fine exchange for me. I'm more mobile, I can go after legs, I can be more effective at off-balancing her. And so the stability, mobility trade-off that she's working with, I'm also working with. The way that we would notice it in her is her stance. Was she on 2 feet? Did she have 2 knees down? For me, it's where's my spine? Is my spine being held up by my legs and hips right now? Or is the ground doing that and I can have my legs up in the air and pushing on my partner? Okay, so now these are some of the arrangements that we have. Where is my partner? Where am I? And what are we trying to accomplish? Staying lined up with our center lines, things like this. When we have our center lines lined up and I have my legs on her, I'm able to use the strongest movement in the whole human body, which is a form of leg press, to manage the distance between the two of us. Even if someone is much taller than you, very often your leg will still be longer than their arms. Even if someone's much stronger than you, very often the power of your 2 legs in a leg press will be stronger than one of their arms or just their body weight or things like this. So we create stability, or we use mobility in order to keep our legs between our partner, in order to try and keep our center lines lined up. The big advantage of doing that is I get to use a leg press to manage the distance between our center lines. Okay, so there's a lot sort of going on in what I just said there, but I say it like that because we're going to keep returning to this notion, and if you just do this simple thing of keep your center lines lined up and keep your legs between the 2 of you, if you're playing guard, that's all you ever have to do. Okay, and I mean that in the literal sense. Our center lines are lined up and my legs are between the 2 of us. My defensive guard is done. Okay, so let's look at some examples of that. So here's the one we've been using. We're in a position more or less like this. I've got legs between the 2 of us, center lines lined up, I'm fine. Emmy starts walking to the side here, and I just fell asleep at the wheel and totally lost track of her. Now I'm not fine. In fact, if we started a race right now where her knee was trying to get to my stomach and I was trying to stop her from passing my guard, there's actually going to be some contention here. She might get the guard pass. I probably could figure something out to do, and I might stop that guard pass, but then she's going to be going to my back. So let's say she puts her knee down towards me. Oh no, it's not going well. And I realize I need to do something about this. I try to throw a leg over, and we might start walking around towards my back here, and then things are just all over the place, okay? So that's not so good. And all that happened was she broke that alignment at the center line. So, well, what if I did lose track here, and as she goes to the side here, I just track her leg with my right hand, and I just use this so that as she keeps walking, I can pull myself and realign with her. Now I'm fine again. And this comes back to that notion of I'm on a sort of smaller circle than she is. So once she moves, if I just anchor onto her leg, I can realign with her, no problem. Let's look at an even more extreme example. Now she goes all the way to about here. Okay, I somehow find her leg here. I use the front-facing camera, and then I throw my outside leg over, and I carry myself into this position here. And so, obviously, I'm fine again. Let's go even more extreme. Stay right up there. And she went all the way around, and she's at this position here. Well, our center lines are lined up. So if I get a leg between the 2 of us, I'm actually fine here. Now, this is not a great attacking position. It's not the worst attacking position, but I do have a leg between the 2 of us. If Em tried to come down and use her chest and stomach to pin me, there's no meaningful upper body contact. You can hear I'm fine right now. Okay, she tries to crush me, really make me uncomfortable here. There's no issue carrying her body weight. And then I can easily spin out from here, realign our bodies, and we're good to go. So I said the keep your center lines lined up statement with the at least a leg between the 2 of you, because you want to sort of have this idea of, okay, what do I have to do to know that I'm safe? What's the minimum requirement? Well, center lines line up, legs between the 2 of you, and you're fine. You're not attacking them yet, but you're defensively sound. Okay? Now, again, when we first started, I mentioned that there's a lot of different kinds of guard. I'm sure you're familiar with a handful of submissions, a handful of knockdowns, a handful of sweeps. And there's 10, 15 times that number that's available for you to study. There's a wealth of things you can do from guard. So we start dividing up our guard position, or the dynamics of our guard, into a defensive portion and an offensive portion. What I've basically been talking about this whole time is the defensive aspect. Okay, so there's a threat developing or somebody's getting close in range. I do something to make sure that defensively I'm sound. That she starts running around my body, I know what I need to do to keep her at bay and not be under the threat of the side control, getting my back taken, or being mounted. Once I'm able to do that, I can start thinking about going on the offense. Now, if defense was keep your center lines lined up and keep legs between the two of you, the transition from defensive to offensive is create 4 points of contact. Now, I'll show that right now, but what it actually ends up being in the play of a particular round is 4 points of contact, but really 3, with one of those points sort of moving around as you develop your attack. Okay, so let's say that I'm here with them, and let's see, we switch your stance. We switch your stance. And so you can see we've got our lead leg here, and we have not breached that toe line. I'm seated, she's standing. She gets her hands in front here, and she's got her head position ready to go. I come in and I take a grip on her collar. We'll revisit this in a moment. And I push and pull on her, and I bring her in, and I hook inside her legs, and I go up here, and I grab a sleeve grip like this. Okay, so I've got my defensive guard done. My center line and her center line are lined up. I've got my legs between the two of us, so defensively I'm totally fine. If she tried to crush me, pin me, do all those different things, it's not going to happen. Now I go on the offense. I add a grip and a second grip. Now there's a lot of things these grips do for me, but what I want you to think about in terms of how it interacts with what we've gone over is these additional points of contact keep her stuck to my legs. Okay? As I pull on these grips and I try to pull my elbows down towards my hip, if she starts posturing up and away, I'm not just trying to pull her down. That's not what's critical. That will come later from off balancing and things like this. What's critical is that my grips assist my legs in being stuck to her. So I pull my elbows towards my hips and I turn my palms up. Now if she goes back and away from me, no problem. I just keep my head moving towards my hands. If she starts walking back on me, she'll just drag me along the floor. That's totally fine. What I don't want is to have my legs relax or my grips relax in a way where she gets unstuck from my legs. Like this. Where the legs become floppy or the grips sort of separate from the body and then they separate from your legs. And now you have no offense, and worse, you've got no defense. Your legs are going to start drifting around, they're going to start passing, and that's tough to deal with. So now we've got this idea of a defensive portion of guard and an offensive portion of guard. Defensively, we're interested in understanding sort of what are the different things that I've got to address here. Well, there's angle, so she starts going to the side one way or the other, and I turn slightly to keep our center lines lined up. As long as our center lines are lined up, she does not have an advantage with regards to angle. She goes to the other side, and I do the same thing. Okay, she scoots around here. Now, one other thing that might be going on is she goes down to her knees here. Not nearly as mobile, but much more stable. Much easier for her to pin me, get in my half guard, and try to pass from there. Okay, so she's much less mobile, but much more stable. Maybe she comes in and she starts trying to bring her knees very close to me here, work on getting an underhook in one way or another, and start to pass my guard from a position like this. So maybe I don't try to use the advantage of mobility so much, but I try to gain an advantage in height. So she's dropped down to her knees, she's brought her head down, perfect. I'm gonna bring my head up. I heist by bringing my knee and my foot back to my hand. That frees my hand to come off the floor. I can use that to attack one of her bases of support, establish another point of contact, and go back to playing guard. Lots of different things that can happen. There's another idea here where I've got our center lines lined up. I'm making sure that if there's an opportunity to gain a height advantage, I take it. All the while, I'm keeping my legs between the two of us so that I can make use of that leg press. Now, it was pretty easy to see a moment ago when I was playing with a spider guard how this leg press is coming into play. It's literally a single leg press at a time here, or bringing them forward to off balance them. That's usually pretty easy to see. But from a seated position, the leg press operates a little bit differently. Because now I'm seated versus a moment ago when I was on my back, I'm actually more mobile. Remember, I was here, very stable. I get to take my feet off the ground and I can leg press my partner or move myself. Mostly I can keep her away from me. When I go here, I'm more mobile, but now my leg is sort of on the floor. So the leg press is used a little bit differently. Instead of it being used to push her away, it's going to be used to move myself away. And that's going to be pretty obvious. That's what the heist is. That's what scooting away from someone is. I'm leg pressing against the ground in order to use this mobility to move away from the other person if need be. Okay, so it's the same tool. It's the same leg press. It just looks slightly different because I'm using it now to move myself instead of to move her away. Okay, so I've been harping on these ideas for a little bit now, and I just want to make sure that we're sort of digesting the same ideas and sort of keeping track of the different things that have come up so far. We've got this idea of distance. We measure that at the toe line. Is her toe line past mine or not? We've got this idea of angle. Does she have, am I able to keep our center lines lined up? Even if she goes all the way past my head, if our center lines are lined up, I can invert my body and put legs on her and I'm fine. So we've got this idea of angle, we've got distance, we've got height, which is where's my head in relation to hers. Her head comes down, my head goes up. Good for me, not so good for her. All the while these things are happening, she's developing angle, I'm trying to maintain distance. I'm always going to keep at least one leg between the two of us. Okay? Now, when you think about one leg between the two of us, there's two main parts of your body I want you to focus on. The first one is the top of your knee, where your shin meets your knee or becomes your knee joint. Okay? This portion right here. The second one is the bottom of your foot. If you ever get the top of the area where your tibia meets your kneecap, right where that crosses over, if that touches their torso, you're fine. If the bottom of your foot touches this box that's their torso, you're fine. And as you get more skilled, that will expand a little bit and you'll be able to go, if the bottom of the foot touches the elbow to the torso, you're fine. But for now, we'll keep the target relatively conservative as just the torso, from their belt or the crease of their hip up to their shoulders. You get your knee or your foot on them and you're safe. Okay, so that's going to govern a lot of the movements that we make when we're trying to keep track of this height position, this height advantage, this angle and center line. We're trying to keep track of one leg on them or not. We got to reduce what we mean by leg. It's not all the different parts of your legs that you need to worry about. Just, can I put this part of my shin and knee or the bottom of my foot on her torso? If yes, you're fine. Let's look at some examples. So we'll sort of pick it up from a similar place we've gone before, so if you're saying this. And she goes over to the side here. Now I take my outside leg here and I just place it right there on the crease of her hip or right on her elbow. Okay, this right here will completely allow me to recover center line position. If Em starts placing weight on my leg, I can hold up her body weight, no problem. Okay? My spine is stable. The rest of my body is in a sound position. If she tries to put weight on me, I'm able to hold it up. It's not, it doesn't have any like mechanical faults to it. And then I just line back up with her. I've got two legs on her. If she goes all the way to 12 o'clock on me, I can again put the bottom of my foot on her. If she tries to drop down on me, this will keep me safe. You'll see that in general, when we've got the bottom of the foot working on one leg, the knee of the other leg is usually going to be in play. So we can think of it as having a long and a short leg. So in a position like this here, I might bring my leg up here, and it's the bottom of my foot that's keeping me safe. But sometimes people beat the bottom of your leg, they anticipate it coming. Let's say she grabs my pants here, and she just starts moving my leg out of the way. Now I've got this knee that starts to take over. So if she tries to come down and pin me, she lands on that knee. And you see I can spin out, realign my body, and we're ready to go. Now I've got the two knees between us, and I'm fine. So again, I haven't shown any sweeps. I've shown how to hip heist a little bit, shown how to scoot around the mat. It's not, none of this is difficult or particularly demanding of like athleticism. But what we're really trying to understand is what are these sort of battle lines that are going to be contested when she's trying to pass my guard and I'm trying to defend my guard. There's a few of them. And if you can keep track of them, if you can make sure that none of those are ever broken down very thoroughly, you will be fine. What tends to happen though is somebody will have one part of their guard compromised, and usually one of two things happens. They then rush and try to finish whatever attack they thought they were going to get, and they actually end up making things worse. I'm sure maybe attempted an arm lock or a triangle, and the person started passing your guard or just was not resolving favorably, and you thought, well, if it's just a little more, maybe I'll, and you never do. And if you do, they made a mistake. So there's this idea if you start losing track of things, or what probably more commonly, you didn't know what you were supposed to keep track of in the first place, if that starts to happen, then it can be tempting to think, oh, I'll just get them with this attack and it'll all be fine. And it's never fine. And as you advance more and more, and you start going with brown and black belts and better black belts, it will never ever be fine, because they will know that you didn't have that triangle, you didn't have that arm lock, and the more you hunt for that arm lock, the less you are recovering your guard. And my job passing your guard, I just inserted myself in this hypothetical, the more you try to insist on that arm lock, the easier it is to just shut the legs by and pass the guard. Okay, so this is also why we've started talking about this defensive and offensive portions of your guard. If your offense is not going well, and you get a sense that they're maybe compromising you, they probably are. They're probably getting some sort of guard pass to start to develop. Just stop attacking them, defend your guard, line up center line to center line, put legs between the two of you, and reset your attack. Okay. Again, let's keep this idea in mind of the guard being the big battleground in jiu-jitsu. Someone passes your guard, I want you thinking of that like you basically got submitted, because if they didn't submit you that round, if they were given more time, they would have. Or as they get better and you get better, they will be able to submit you. And the guard pass is really the key that unlocks that door and lets them break through. At the same time, if you have a guard that can never be passed and you can retain your guard against all kinds of different threats, then you can start to attack and be effective from guard. And on top of that, when you start passing guard, you're going to be so much more effective, because you're going to understand what the different components that are needed to keep someone's guard safe, and therefore what do you need to break in order to get past someone's guard. Now, the other sort of way that these things can play out that I've noticed over the years that I definitely had trouble with, just to give you a little bit of background, I for years was like, close guard, that's it, I don't want to do anything else, I don't need to do anything else, close guard is where it was at. And for a while I could do that. I could be effective against people that were graded much higher than me, senior students and in competitions. I would do very well with just closed guard. And some other time I'll talk about maybe some of the advantages of that. But the thing I didn't really notice until I started looking back on it was a habit that lots of people end up developing, which is a reluctance to go on top and pass someone's guard, even when would be the best thing for you to do, because you want to play guard so much, and it's just, oh, if I could just play guard though, if I could just play closed guard, I'd probably win. But it shuts, it sort of puts blinders on you, and you don't really see these seemingly obvious attacks. So let's look at one example here. If I've got M, and let's say, for example, that M started on her knees here. And I'm a guard player, so I come in and I get my grips, and I'm interested in drawing her in and playing guard here. But she knows that. She knows I want to try and drag her into a triangle or drag her into closed guard. So she maybe puts a hand on my leg here, another hand on my other leg, and she's using this as a brace so that as I try to pull, she keeps herself away from me. And as I pull and pull and pull, she doesn't like that. She's not having any of it. So what you should do in these kinds of situations is not go, oh, how do I break this grip and just make them play guard? No, what they're doing is when they brace here, they're keeping themselves at this height. So all you do is you go up and you gain a height advantage and you knock them down. Now, if you are truly suffering from this problem that I've described, where you only want to play guard, what I just did there is almost unthinkable. I know this because up until right around purple, blue, there's this, oh, I'm going to ask you to just play guard, but I'll just play more guard. And they'll back away from me and they'll just move away. But if I just could bring them into, if I did a different guard, no, this is, just get up. Get used to getting up. Because your ability to sweep somebody is largely going to come down to your ability to wrestle them with a single leg takedown as you get better and better. When you are both black belts and it is time to win, you think that me doing this, or me doing this, she's just going to melt and fall over? No. She's going to fight me tooth and nail every single step along the way. Me doing this is me going, ha, and then I bring her to my guard. off of a legitimate threat of me getting on top and knocking her over. Okay? I'm saying this to you now, not because it's so easy or something like this, but because it's something it will be very easy to let yourself avoid if you're a guard player. Is, I don't need to go on top, I'll just bring them back to guard, and it will come up in these sort of subtle ways. And we want to know right from the start, how do I know if I should stop playing guard and start being on top? Okay? Can you gain a height advantage? Can you get your head higher than theirs? If yes, time to stop playing guard, time to get up, off your butt, guillotines, front headlocks, single legs, knockdowns. When they avoid that, all that good guard activity you had in mind is back on the table. Okay? But this is one route that just can really throw people off for a long period of time. They just will avoid wrestling the single leg, they'll avoid going on top, and I understand why, but just know what the cue is. The cue is, can I get my head higher than hers? If so, it's not time to play guard. It's time to get up. It's time to start knocking them over. When they respond to that, then you can play guard. So let's look at a way that might play out in sort of a simple way. I've got my grip here. I want to drag her into my guard. She knows that. She starts putting a brace against my leg here, so that when I try to pull her head down, she uses the grip and her stable leg positioning to keep her head up and away. Okay, so I start going up and away. She doesn't like this. She can sense through my grip, she can feel my body weight hanging and me starting to get taller against her. So she starts putting hands on me and standing up. All the way, and retaining her height advantage. So now I go in and I start playing my guard. And it was so easy, she exposed all the area of the hip, she let me get into one of the legs. All these things that I wanted to do originally are now actually available from a simple movement where I just try to get my head up. So again, I know I haven't really gone over a particular technique, but there are an unlimited number of techniques for us to go over. What I want us all to do from the very beginning is to really, really understand what is happening when you play guard. What are you using? What are your tools that are working for you? What do you need to be defensively sound? What do you need to convert from defense to offense? I'll review all this stuff in a minute, but just some of the topics that we've sort of been juggling up to this point. What are the different variables that are going to be important when we engage? Things like distance, things like height, things like angle. How do we address all of that without having to think about, is my height, should I go height or should I do angle, or what about distance? The way we do that is our center lines line up. If our center lines line up, then I've addressed angle. Our head position, height. If I can get my head higher than hers, I'm going to win the height battle, and I should always do that. And distance, I keep one portion of one of my legs, either the knee and shin or the bottom of the foot, on the box that is her torso, and if I have that, I can always maintain distance. Okay? Now specific movements start to come into play here. Things like heisting up, we use this movement to gain a height advantage. Things like scooting, we use this to maintain angle, to keep our center lines lined up. And then the last one was this idea of long and short. I've got one leg that might be long, one leg that might be short, so that I've got the bottom of the foot on her, and then a knee as a backup if the bottom of the foot sort of falls off or I lose track of it. Okay, and if we can do this series of things and we can just stay on top of it, then the defensive aspect of our guard is ready to go. So I'll go through this cycle a couple more times just so you have some more examples to work with. And then we'll do a little bit of a review of the offensive portion. And then we'll connect this back to the escapes that we did from the back position and sort of go from where we started this beginner series up to where we are now. Okay, so let's say I'm on my back here and Emmy is standing up over me. Okay, so our center lines are lined up. I've got my legs between the two of us. I don't have any grip though, so I know that only defensively am I done. If I want to go on the attack, I've got to add 4 points of contact. Emmy goes to the side on me. It's not a big of a deal. I just move my hip. She goes to the other side on me, a little bit more. Now she's got a pretty good angle on me. Our center lines are not even close to lined up. So I might track her leg here with my right, take my outside leg, and I put the bottom of my foot on her. I've got one leg that's long, and one leg here that's short. I use both of those to realign with her. Now our center lines are lined up. I've got two legs between us. I've got an additional grip now So I've got another point of contact, and maybe I add another one here. Okay, so I've got grips on both of her legs. That can go even further. If she were to go all the way, let's go all the way up past my head here, right here. Our center lines line up. I keep legs between the two of us. I can convert this into a safe type of guard. She's not having so much success being mobile, going side to side. I was able to keep that outside leg on her and realign. So she changes tactics, come down to her knees. Now she's much more stable. Doing this type of thing is maybe not so useful in this scenario, but I know that I can gain an advantage in height. So maybe I grip up, I heist up to a knee and foot, and I take my hand off the floor so that I can threaten her balance and I can start dragging her back down to the ground. Okay? With center lines lined up, with legs between the two of us, defense is taken care of. If you're ever unsure if your defense is sound, stop what you're doing, go back, take care of your defense. You can always renew your attack once you're safe in your guard again. Okay, but with that said, now we're in this position and I've got my legs between us. I've got our center lines lined up. So I go further. I get a grip on her. I've got a foot in contact with her here. I add another grip, and now with two grips and a third point of contact here and a fourth point of contact with the ground. Remember I said sometimes it's going to be three and one that's moving. Here's an example. Now I've got 3 points of contact and I can start going over, sweeping to the side and working from this guard position. Now I can be offensive against her. Okay, so this is just again the sort of defensive pieces that you'll have to keep track of and that will be in play. A quick look at what the conversion to offense will look like. It's going to be those 4 points of contact. Now let's circle this back to when someone's on your back and we go through that series of movements that gave us our escape, and we'll convert this into a defensive guard, and then we'll be sort of circled back and recovered all the stuff that we've covered up to this point. So if I can have you on my back here. And, well, she's got her hooks in, she's got her seatbelt, and we're gonna go right in here. She's got her grip, and don't ever help someone do this. Yeah, don't help them get the grip. Okay, just get your grip. Okay, so I got my defensive grip. I've got that webbing of my thumb and first finger. I go ahead and I cover that up. Now she's got her head trapped close here, so I've got to get past that. I take one leg, I make it short. The other leg, make it long. Oh, that sounds familiar. And then I start going over to the side here. Now I'm going to use my head going forward and around to free myself from the head trap. My long leg goes towards my short leg. And as that happens, I'm going to try to get rid of her bottom hook and step my body into a position where she can't recover the hooks on me. So my legs are not like this. Okay. Once that's done, I can take my inside elbow down towards the floor. She starts going up to try and get on top. I put my foot up higher than my knee and I connect my elbow and knee together. Okay. I use this elbow knee frame. Remember what I said about that top of the knee and the shin? That's on her torso. So I know I'm actually safe if I just move into the next phase, which is that defensive guard. So we're here. I need to get my center line lined up with her. Then I put my legs between the two of us. Now that our center lines are lined up, and now that I've got legs between us, I'm fine when it comes to defense. I might go on offense, adding 2 grips, setting up, and then going to work from here. Okay. So I'll do this again, but you notice that the final steps of the escape from the rear mount were the first initial steps of the guard recovery. It wasn't like I completed the escape and it was done and then we waited and then I did my defensive guard. No. Let's say that escape had 6 steps. Okay, just for now. Step 5 and 6 of the escape were step 1 and 2 of the guard recovery. There's overlap in them. And it's super important that you understand this, because if there is ever a gap in your escape, in your defensive guard, guess what's in that gap? The other person, and they are crushing you using that gap. So you've got to start thinking, okay, I'm about to finish my escape. I know my inside elbow is about to get to the floor. So what comes next? Defensive guard. It's not an escape anymore, it's defensive guard. And I'm already building up those pieces. I'm already starting to think about center line and angle. And can I gain a height advantage? If I do a good frame and I move my head and they lose their balance, I'm getting up. I'm gonna drag them down to the floor. Okay, so we start to think about not just the escape and defensive guard and offensive guard, but the overlap between the overlap between the escape and the defense and the offense. And the more there's overlap, the less there is an opportunity for them to intercept what you're doing and regain any ground that they've lost. Okay? And I'll just say one more point on that, and then I'll show this one more time. Whenever you are doing, let's say, the 6 steps of that escape, whenever they do something, it's always going to be by cutting in between some of those steps, between 2 and 3 or 1 and 2. And so we always want to reduce the number of steps of any given technique, but we can't reduce them beyond the point where they're not effective. I can't just say, now there's 1 step to your back escape. It's like, no, there's a certain minimum that you have to go through to escape, but I can't add any more steps. If the back escape is 6 steps and I make it 9 steps, those 3 additional things in there, wherever they were, you go with someone who knows what they're doing, they are going to crush you 3 times for those 3 additional steps. I guarantee it. They don't even have to know what they are. They will feel that there is a gap in your elbow knee frame, or that you moved your head an additional time and they're just ripping on your collar. These are not things that people can necessarily consciously tell you they're doing, but they are definitely doing it. And so we're always looking to minimize the number of things we have to do while still being maximally effective. And one way to reduce the number of things you do is overlap them with each other. So that I've got 6 steps for my escape, let's say, but 2 of those last 2, are actually overlapping with my defensive guard. So do I go out 4 steps or 6 steps? My guard, you see where I'm getting at, where the more they overlap, the less extraneous movement that there is, and the more efficient that I'm going to be. And that's really what we're aiming at overall, is to be more efficient than the other person so we can overcome them. So all that said, now Emma's on my back. She's got those vicious hooks. She's got the seatbelt grip. I'm not even helping her with this grip this time, but I get my defensive grip. I bring my head over to the side by going short and long. My head goes down to the floor. I go forward and around. My head is free. You can't see it because I'm not in frame, but I straighten out my left leg and I use my right leg to eventually find hers and free myself from the hook. Now I tuck in my 2 feet. I take my inside elbow down to the floor. Here's that overlap. I just did my escape, but I'm also beginning my defensive guard. I've got the elbow knee frame. With the elbow knee frame in place, I want to go center line to center line with her, and then I want to line up with 2 legs between the 2 of us. Now I've done my defensive guard. As I shifted into this position here, my defensive guard was finished. So now I'm thinking about going on the offense, and that's going to mean 2 additional grips. Now, Emmy's got her hands in a little bit of a reluctant gripping position. She doesn't take in a decisive collar grip or grab my pants or anything like that. So I would have to go up to her. If she were grabbing a pant leg and maybe my collar, this might make it, this might limit the number of grips that I can take in a way that's actually good for me, because I grab her sleeve, I grab a lapel, and she's sort of given me information about what I should do. Control here, we go to an off balance, and we start to look at going on the offense. Again, we'll tackle that offensive portion in the coming lessons, but suffice to say, there's another section of overlap there. As I complete my defensive guard, they're going to be responding. Nobody wants to be on your back and then have you escape, recover guard, and then sweep them or snap them down. If you escape, they're going to do something grip-wise to try and pin you, or not have you go back to your guard completely, but maybe restrain you to a half guard. So they'll be gripping on you, they'll be arranging their legs, and that'll give you some indication as to what those grips should be that you're really looking for when it's time to go on offense, okay? And we'll come back to that when it's time. Okay, but overall we've done this we've worked with this idea of for on someone's back, we want to be very confident that you can just assume if you get to someone's back, there's a submission. There's a high probability of a submission, and that's where we started. A lot of what we do from guard is going to be based on an assumption that if the opportunity to take someone's back presents itself, not only are you going to take it, but you're going to be able to keep it until the end of the match, or better still, gain a submission. There's just this assumption that once the back is there, the match is over. Another assumption that we're going to see is that from the guard position, there's an assumption that if you lock somebody in a trap triangle, it's over. And so we're going to study the triangle as early as possible so that that can become more and more true. Anytime somebody gives you an opportunity to triangle them, you take it and it's over. And their movement becomes predictable as they try to avoid being put in these kinds of triangles. So we started off on the back, making sure we can strangle somebody, making sure we know how to deal with the defenses. We circled around that for a little bit, then we flipped it and we went to the defense. What do I need to do if someone's on my back? That's more likely going to be the case when you're just starting out. We looked at some of the defensive grips, we looked at some of the movements, and we got to this notion of if I get that inside elbow down to the floor, I'm out. And when we started up today, we started to see that there's this idea of the elbow down to the floor is really this half of an elbow knee frame. And an elbow knee frame is a tool that we use to maintain distance between our two center lines or between our spines. And then we started to see, okay, well, what am I doing with that? Well, I'm trying to go to this position called guard. Okay, and in the guard position, I get to use my legs either on you or on the floor in a way that makes it very efficient for me to maintain distance between the two of us. And we saw that really it's just this portion of the knee or this portion of the foot that when we say legs between us, that's really all I need is this or this. And if I have that, okay, well, I'm going to be able to be effective with that leg press. Then we start tackling the idea of, okay, there's a lot going on when you're playing guard. There's a lot of things that you're going to have to manage and keep track of. And most of the time when somebody gets their guard passed, it's not that they didn't know what happened. It's usually, that was a bullfighter or that was a stack pass. They know. It's that they lost track of some variable or they didn't put it in the right order of priority. And so today we try to address, well, what are those variables, or what are at least the bulk of those variables? It was things like height, where's my head in relation to my partner's head? We briefly mentioned level, which is the relation of my hips in relation to my partner's. I didn't get too much into that today, but we'll come back to it. There's this notion of distance, how far apart are our center lines, and more importantly, who's deciding how far apart they are? Someone's passing and they're standing, they're very mobile, so you got to be careful about them getting too close to you too early or not on your terms. Okay, so we might use scooting in order to manage that. We might use leg presses to manage that. We looked at this idea of angle, where they're going to try to get their center line to cross your center line. And so you've got to be very careful that when they move to the side, you're following them and you're maintaining an alignment of center line to center line. And we took that one step further and we saw that, well, what if I do all that? What if I make sure that I win battles for head height? What if I keep our center lines lined up, legs between the two of us? What if I make sure that they're never gaining advantageous angle or height or distance? Well, now you're thinking about offense. You're thinking about 4 points of connection or 3 points of connection with one of them moving around. And now once you have 4 points of connection, now you are controlling them in ways that are productive for you. And we can go into triangles, we can go into knockdowns, we can go into sweeps, and we can start doing all the stuff that's enjoyable and fun to do from guard. Okay, but that's an outline I wanted to come to today, because we're going to keep referencing this, and it will become a more fluent language for you to speak if you're not as comfortable with it yet. And then what's really useful is once you've hammered all this in, and it will happen faster than you think if you're not used to it already, then when you are presented with novel problems, somebody passing a guard, and you've never seen it before, you will be able to improvise your way out of it using this reasoning that we're starting to work through, and reliably protect your guard, be defensively sound, convert it to offense, and then sweep, knockdown, or create a submission. And that's really where the lessons of jiu-jitsu are powerful. It's easy to imitate a movement that I do on another person and you go and copy it. That's not that tough. What's tough is the other person is smart, they know what you want to do, they're trying to be clever and trick you into thinking, and then they go and they're doing things. How are you gonna manage all that? You gotta have something you can lean into when you've never seen the problem they're presenting, but you can confidently address it. And I'll say this last piece to leave us off. When it comes time to defend against something in jiu-jitsu, just fighting in general, the biggest thing you need to be able to defend against something is to be able to anticipate it. If you can correctly anticipate what is coming down the pipeline, and it's just that one thing, easy to defend. When it's multiple things, you've got to be able to organize what order are they coming in. But for the defensive player, it always comes down 95% plus to how much did you accurately anticipate what was about to happen. If you're confused about what the information is that you're getting, you cannot anticipate what that thing is. If you don't understand what the center line is, if someone is using their footwork to try and fake you out, like somebody crossing you over in basketball, and they're very adept in their footwork, you are not even going to know what you lost track of when you lost track of it and they passed your guard. But if you just have this image of a line that cuts down the middle of their body and down the middle of yours, and you treat them like a pair of magnets that are always facing and lined up with each other, then that part will be very difficult for someone to overcome. If you have this notion that you can sense where their head is and how you can manipulate and bring it down, and you're always doing that, bringing their head down in a way that brings your head up, then you're always going to be winning this battle for height. And when you can do this in a sort of unconscious way, then you're anticipating these problems before they even really manifest themselves. And this is what is important in jiu-jitsu, because every round, every guard pass is slightly different. And so we want to have very reliable principles that we can work with to maintain a defensive guard, to do our escapes, or to go on the offense when it's time to do that. Okay, so we'll leave it there for now, but we'll keep returning to this. We'll be studying guard for a little bit, and you'll see how these ideas manifest themselves in all kinds of different guards and all kinds of escapes and other interesting positions.
Professor?
Yes?
Working backwards are kind of like counterintuitive to your lesson today. Fundamentals of body lock passing. Like, so lately, like, my pressure passing has been on the decline, and I've been utilizing a lot of like footwork and like standing passes, but I deal with a lot of inversions and like leg entries now. And so I would like to get back to that pressure passing aspect, and like body lock is super powerful, but I suck at it. And like my only idea when it comes to body lock passing, not including like my over under, but like legit, around the waist, is like Tozy pass or like Paulista pass, but those aren't really good passes anymore.
They're not. Yeah, you're right. Did you just want me to confirm that they're not good passes anymore? I mean, I'm happy to. No, I get what you're saying. Let me give you a thought here, and you tell me what you think. Okay. So body lock passing. Body lock passing refers to situations where I want to. Body lock. First of all, let me put this in context. Body lock passing is much more common in no-gi. And in large part because you can't use these fun parts of the pants to control large portions of the leg. And so what tends to happen is, even if you manage to get some sort of guard pass developed in a no-gi situation, it's pretty easy for them to slide away from you, realign the center line, and you're back at square one. So people start to develop these types of guard passes where they were locking underneath the hips, or even sometimes up at the upper back, depending on where they were in the guard pass, and they would lock the hip in place so that once I develop the actual guard pass, it's much harder for her to realign the rest of her body. And you could say that variations on an over-under pass, things like this, are types of body lock passes. But what I would recommend you think about first is, in an over-under pass, one of the main things that opens the door is to get past the bottom knee, or the knee that is holding you if you were in a half guard. So if I wanted to over-under pass here, and I was in a position like this, you can see that this knee is by itself, even without any grip, going to stop me from being effective in an over-under. But if this leg were holding my leg here, and this knee starts to become less and less part of the picture here, and I get my knee over the top of it, now the over-under pass is much more likely. It's probably one of the better passes I could go for here. Put my shoulder down, and we develop the over-under pass. When you start looking at body lock passes, the main thing that's going to give you trouble is they're going to have one leg between you while you develop the body lock. That's one of the reasons you want to use it. But it's that bottom leg re-emerging, just like in an over-under pass, that's going to cause a lot of the problems. So if I had an over-under pass started here, but this knee is not out of the way yet, then I try to put pressure on M. She just pushes her head away with this leg, and it's going to be impossible for me to get the guard pass, and probably kind of dangerous for me to even go for it. But if I was able to get into a position where my knee is holding her leg out of the picture, like this, now the over-under pass, much more viable. Body lock passes, much more viable. And I can create a lot of different grips to work with. What you want to be sure of is you've done something that keeps that bottom knee out of the way, when you go to your body lock passing. A lot of times what gives people trouble is they think that they're going to use just their footwork to beat the other person's footwork and address this knee after they've got the body lock. So it might be something like this. I come in, M sits up, I get my body lock, and I think, all right, so now I've got my body lock, and now I'll deal with this knee. I'll just step back and over, and it's tough to step over. Well, I'll do it on the other side. It's tough to deal with this leg once you've got the body lock. But if you deal with it before you commit to the body lock, and then you lock up, much more realistic for you to use the body lock to actually pass. Okay. Now, I recommend you don't use your hand to deal with the leg, but instead use your elbow, because your hand is going to want to be stabilizing you on the floor in a no-gi situation, or it's going to want to be close to your remaining grip for the body lock, whether you go wrist to wrist or palm to palm. You're going to want to have your hands ready to clamp together, and so the way you deal with this knee is often going to be with your elbow. So I might be going in, we're in a position more or less like this, and M sits up on me. I might go here. I can lock my hands, but instead of locking my hands first, I use my elbow and I clear the leg, and then the body lock comes in. And it's that knee being cleared that's going to give you a lot of the opportunities to go into a body lock type of pass. Now, the other thing you mentioned that's related to this, I just said don't use your hands to deal with the legs. That changes when you can push their leg down their sideline. So if we're in a position like this, and M goes long and short on me, she's got a long and she's got a short, and here we have a sort of boilerplate type of inversion position where I try to put body weight down. It's not going to be useful. In this type of position, you make that V with your hand, and pushing the leg down the body is actually very, very easy to do and very productive. And then you want to create a far knee that you pin onto the ground. And that's going to make it pretty easy to get into a good guard pass position. If M goes elbows and knees together like this, just to really drive the point home. In this position, I can push her leg easily down to the floor. And you see that she started sitting up, but then there's back exposure, so she put her back to the ground. And then I would want to make this the far leg, push it down to the ground, and I can go into a pass. Most of the time, you're not at an angle where this is actually available to you, pushing the leg down the body. Normally, you're in a position down here, something like this is happening, and so you get into I would say, good habit of not trying to push the leg down with your hand. But if you're passing an inverted guard or dealing with inversions, that option that I was just mentioning, that comes up all the time. So here, not so available. I'll probably need to use my elbow. Start my guard pass. Let's say she connects elbow and knee together. I rise up and I see this leg crossing over to me here. Now, I can take this knee, the inside leg, and I can start pushing that knee down to the floor. And now I can start clearing legs out of the way and creating an effective pin. But when the knees come up to the chest in an inverted type of position, this is one of the few times that it's effective to push the leg down the body. And let me do it on this side actually. If I push the leg down the body and then I make that the far knee and I push that knee down, that's powerful because it stops them from using that foot on the floor to hip escape away from me. Okay, so let me scoot this over. So if we're here and I push this knee down to the ground like this, and I say, hey, Em, can you go ahead and hip escape away? You see, it's super tough to do. I don't want to simply push on the leg and clear it and help her put her foot on the floor. Now she takes an outside step, she scoots her butt away, and there's the elbow knee escape. Okay, so we can clear the knee pretty easily. When we attack it from this angle, we can push it down the sideline of the body. But we gotta go further than that. We've gotta pin the knee to the ground so that there's no elbow knee escape, and then we can finish the guard pass. Does that get into what you're asking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? I'm happy to get into it more, but I just thought I'd start you off with my initial thoughts on it.
No, not right now. Just like reflecting on my roles, and like it happens sometimes in the morning, but like definitely with like the MMA guys, like Louis Smolka has a huge propensity to invert on me. And it's really annoying because I like to standing pass, so he inverts and then like starts playing around. So I gotta like keep trying to use my footwork on the outside. And I'm like, why don't I just smash this guy?
Yeah, and isn't that always the question you ask yourself? You're like, why don't I just smash this guy? And he's like, well, because I'm gonna invert and stop you.
Yeah. And then like over under doesn't necessarily work as efficiently in no gi as it does in gi.
Yeah.
So it's just like.
Let me give you a couple other thoughts on over under. Because I've had a lot of people over the years really sort of find the over under to be a guard pass they really like, and there's just some details that I've noticed. Like people can get really good with the over under pass, and still kind of miss like a couple of things that make a big difference, and they actually relate to what I was just talking about. Can I have you go head here and legs here?
Back to the front?
Yes, you're going back. So if you remember a moment ago I was saying, well, if I go to this side and I were to pin the far knee down, that makes it hard for my partner to elbow knee escape on me and recover their guard. In an over-under pass, one thing that often gets overlooked is, people will do a good job clearing this knee, but this shoulder, it can be placed sort of imprecisely. What we want to do is we want to put that shoulder right inside of the thigh, as if I was going to do that same knee pin here. So I make that false grip where I curl my wrist here, I pull my elbow to my hip, and I tuck my shoulder on the inside of the thigh. So if Em goes to put her foot on the ground here, I know that it's pretty easy to hip escape now and recover guard, but I use my shoulder to push her knee outside her foot. Now that hip escape's not there. This often gets lost just because when you're seeing someone do it, this happens. Their head is covering their hand, their shoulders on the center line, they lift here, and so the shoulder gets covered up, and it can be hard to pick up on that particular detail. But if you're doing an over-under pass and you land on someone's their frames and they're hip escaping away, the over-under pass, you'll get the sense you're sort of chasing them down, but you're never able to keep pace with them. They're scooting away from you. It's because you're trying to run after somebody who's running away from you in a sort of efficient way. The way we do that is sort of flatten the tires on them, and we push this knee down to the ground. Now that hip escape is gone, and I can walk really slowly past their guard. So that instead of this, where maybe Em has her hands here and she sort of catches my shoulder here, you can close like this, and my shoulder's not in the right position. She puts her foot on the floor, and I try to put body weight on her, but she's scooting away from me, and you see people sort of chasing each other around, and they just go in circles and in circles and circles. But instead, she puts that frame on me, and I just put her knee towards the floor. Now when she goes to scoot away, not happening. I just walk my leg free, pommel, and walk into the side. So that's one other thing I would keep in mind is shoulder inside the thigh to pin the far knee so they don't hip escape on you. And the way you know that you're maybe making that error is you feel like you're chasing them down as they hip escape. And you feel this knee starting to re-emerge and recover guard, and now this knee's back in the way and you gotta go back and readdress it. One other thing, I'm not gonna demonstrate it too much now, but if you're in Emmy's position, is have somebody take 1 or 2 focus mitts and hold them right here. That way, and obviously she doesn't have them, so I'm not gonna fully demonstrate this, you can practice turning and almost punching your shoulder onto the center line, so that this action can really be strongly developed, because that's what's going to let you turn your hips and really create an effective impact here, and then extract your leg and go forward. So pinning that far leg, or for that far knee, sorry, with your inside shoulder, and that will be preventing them from hip escaping away from you and making sort of chase them down. And then creating an effective fixed point with your shoulder, having somebody take some focus mitts, keep them right on their center line, and you just practice impacting with that shoulder and keeping it stuck on them. Do a few repetitions of that, and then do it on the other side. And that will actually help you with a lot of other guard passes. You come in here, I've gotten more comfortable doing this impact here, and I'm used to the fact that when somebody who knows this is happening, they create a strong frame here, then I switch to my other shoulder, and now I can go into other guard passes and be effective from there. So it's a good way to develop the skill of changing from one fixed point to another, that being one shoulder, then the other shoulder. This shoulder becomes a legitimate threat to them. they're catching it, they're framing, they're anticipating it, and then you switch shoulders on them, bring the other shoulder down, and you can go about passing with cross knee or different things like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Was there anything else, any other thoughts come to mind?
No, that's it right now. I mean, that shoulder change in terms of the under knee is like really, because like I would always pressure in and drive the under knee up, as opposed out. Yeah. So I'll just show this just because there's there's people on the internet, right? And they're somebody's gonna watch this, so they'll want to know, or maybe they won't. Who knows? What we're talking about right now is this shoulder here. I'm saying let's put it inside the thigh here. What's really common is people they'll treat it almost like a stack pass, and they'll put it on the hamstring. And then Emmy goes to heavy leg me and just try to push me away, and this is always going to work. And then the knee goes to the chest, the bottom of the foot goes on me, and I have nothing. So we're just changing it a little bit, going inside the thigh and using it to pin the knee instead of going under the hamstring, where it's really better suited for things like single under stack pass and stuff like that. Awesome. Yeah. The thing about what's the way to put this? It's not someone's body weight is not usually the thing that's going to be difficult for you to deal with. Somebody weighs whatever they weigh. 160 pounds. They don't. When you feel all that crushing pressure and all that torque twisting you up, they don't obviously weigh any more than that. They're doing a couple things. One is they're maybe placing their weight on a very small surface area of their body. So the point of their shoulder or this area of the shin and the knee. So it becomes more of a like the edge of a knife rather than like a thick book that it has so much surface area that it's not able to have that same effect of a point on you. And then the other half of it is they're putting you in a compromised position so that even though it's just their body weight, you're not in a mechanically sound position to deal with that body weight. So a clear example of this would be, let's say if I'm here and Em puts her knee on my stomach here, classic knee on belly here, and she takes that other knee off the ground. Now she's more or less trying to keep as much of her weight focused on this small area of her knee as possible. That's why we do things like we want to curl the toes against the hip here so that the toes aren't on the floor, but they lift like this. And then the hands are off the ground, and you can hear I'm having to contend with more of her body weight. You can hear it just in my voice. But the other part of this is if I'm in an unsound position to deal with this, let's say if I have my knees going, if I have my knees going one way and I look the other way, I'm twisting myself up in a way that makes this worse for me. So she's doing something to make it bad for me, and now I'm doing something on top of it. Okay? A lot of this has to do with what are we doing with the hands, with the legs, and with the eyes. Generally, wherever that fixed point is, it's going in a direction. It's twisting into you. It's going right. It's going left. But it's not. You're not going to feel it moving around. But it's going to be opposing you moving in one direction or the other. So right now, M is opposing me, moving to my right. So I might have to start off by going slightly to my left before I go right. Now I can't do it like this. I can't go left, right. That was just my eyes. I can't go left, right. I've got to go left with my legs, left with my frames, and left with my eyes. So that I go left, right. Okay, can I have you jump off real quick? So that I'm not doing this. Left, right. She's going to stop me going right. But if I go left and then right, I use the left to slightly off balance her or to make her shift her weight into a slightly different fixed point, maybe her other foot, so that I can go right. But what tends to happen is, oh, I feel resistance here. I can't turn this way. I can't do anything in this direction. Okay, what if I try this other direction? And people will go just their eyes or just their legs, because we all have this pattern sort of inculcated in us that turning our back to somebody is just the worst thing you can do. And a lot of times it's not a good thing to do. But if I turn away from somebody for the purposes of turning back in, then I can manage how much I'm exposing my back to the other person. So I'm not going, oh, I just turn left and then turn right. I turn left and off balance them, and then I turn right. And so the way you know this is going to happen is you get either, there's a couple cues.
One is, can I get their hands to go onto the floor when their hands weren't on the floor? The only reason that happens, the hands go on the floor when they weren't on the floor, is because they couldn't catch themselves with their legs. So they put their hands on the ground to catch themselves. That's one way you know you did it right. And you'll often hear that more than you'll see that. You'll hear that, and then you know they've lost the balance, and you come back. The other one is when you move, think about how much are you moving their head with whatever this particular operation is that you're doing. So I'm here with them. She's got knee and belly. And I'm feeling a lot of resistance. I'm not having an easy time turning to my right and recovering back to my guard. So I think to myself, I'm going to go left a little bit, and then I'm going to try and come back to my right. How do I know, or what am I accomplishing instead of just turning myself? Well, if I can get her head moving in that direction, I know she's going to have to shift her body weight. So I don't do this. I moved, she barely moved. Instead, I move in a way that gets her head moving. Now I can think about actually escaping. Okay, and the reason you want to use that cue, they're essentially the same thing. They're just ways of knowing whether or not somebody was off balance. Somebody puts their hand on the ground when it was not on the ground before. The reason they do that is because they were not able to use their legs to catch themselves. If they could, they would have, and they wouldn't put their hands on the ground. The second one is when you move somebody's head, that's how you disrupt their balance. When you grab somebody's collar and you start snapping them down and dragging them around the mat, you're indirectly controlling their head and trying to move it around. And so if you organize your own movements by going, okay, was I able to get their head moving? If yes, then that's good. I was able to disrupt their balance, and now I can maybe escape. If no, if they were just like a statue and I was bridging to the side and their head was just totally stable over their hip, then something's off with your movement, or they're responding to you in some way that you'll want to follow up on. But when you're experiencing this sort of uncomfortable pressure or torque, very little of it has to do with the person's body weight. It's much more this idea of them creating what I refer to as a fault in your spine. They're making it so that you are not moving in unison. Your knees are not moving in the same direction as your eyes, in the same direction as your shoulders. And so they're able to put one small point on one small part of you, and it feels like a lot of weight, but when a knife cuts through something, it's not the weight of the knife, it's the fineness of the edge and so the ability to concentrate that force in a small area, that's what really gives it significance. And so when we are dealing with that, what we don't want to do is go, how do I move a lot of their weight? How do I move somebody who feels very heavy? Instead, I want to go, how do I get it so they have to catch all of their own body weight? How do I get it so they're holding all of their body weight for a moment instead of I'm holding all of their body weight for all of these moments and I can't go anywhere? And the way we do it is we got to know what would indicate that they're losing their balance. What would indicate that they are holding their body weight? Well, get their head to move. When their head moves, if their hand hits the ground, you disrupted their balance. And once you do that, you're on your way. You're on your way out. Whatever the escape is that you were struggling with, it probably had a direction left or right to it. What you want to consider as a follow-on or as a setup for that is the opposite direction. I wanted to turn right, really struggling. When I tried to turn right, I felt this pressure being amplified. So instead of going more to the right, I disrupt their balance left. I get their head moving when I go left. I get their hand to hit the floor when I go left, and now I can go back to the right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome.
Great explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that as well.